In the forgotten corners of America, where small towns battle against time and neglect, stories of extraordinary change often begin with the simplest discoveries. This is the remarkable tale of Samuel Tucker, a hard-working peasant whose desperate dig for irrigation revealed something that would transform not just his life, but the destiny of an entire community. When poverty and opportunity collide, the most unlikely heroes emerge from the dust. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. In the drought-stricken valley of Willow Creek, where the Appalachian foothills cradled a community forgotten by progress, Samuel Tucker woke each morning with the same thought burning in his mind. Today might be the day. Things change. At 32, Sam was already bent like an old willow, his hands calloused monuments to labor that never seemed to bear fruit. The year was 1932, and while the rest of America crumbled under the Great Depression, Willow Creek had been poor long, before the stock market crash made poverty fashionable. Sam lived in a crooked cabin at the edge of town, the last remaining piece of the Tucker legacy. 3 generations had worked this same stubborn plot of land, each passing down less than they'd received. His grandfather had owned 40 acres, and dreams of prosperity. His father had managed to keep 15 acres and a mule. Sam was down to 6 acres of dust, rocks, and withered crops that struggled to reach his knees. Morning promises nothing but heat, Sam muttered to himself, splashing creek water on his face from a tin basin. The water was brown, silty from the receding creek that served as Willow Creek's namesake and lifeblood. Through the warped window, he could see his meager fields already shimmering under the relentless July sun. Most of the young men had abandoned Willow Creek years ago, trading rural desperation for urban uncertainty. They packed their hopes in cardboard suitcases and headed to Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, or Louisville, chasing factory work and wages that arrived with the reliability that crops lacked. But Sam remained, anchored by an obligation he couldn't name, and a stubborn belief that the land still had something to offer. He worked odd jobs when he could find them, mending fences for the Harrington estate that dominated the Eastern Valley, helping old Doc Miller repair his clinic's roof, or assisting Widow Jenkins with her modest apple orchard when harvest came. But these opportunities grew scarcer as the drought tightened its grip on the valley. Even the Harringtons, with their vast holdings and mechanical irrigation, felt the pinch of dry times. "You're a relic, Sammy Tucker," Martha Jackson had told him just last Sunday after church. Martha, with her sensible shoes and teaching position at the county school, had once walked the creek banks with Sam in their youth. Now she looked at him with a mixture of pity and exasperation. Holding onto that land is like clutching at smoke. The world's changing. Perhaps she was right. The previous night, Sam had counted his savings, $17.43, hidden in a coffee tin beneath a loose floorboard. Not enough to pay the property tax come October, not enough to buy seed for next spring. Barely enough for flour, coffee, and kerosene to last the month. Breakfast was cornmeal mush, stretching yesterday's portion with extra water. Sam ate standing up, watching the sun climb higher through his eastern window. An idea had been forming in his mind for weeks now, desperate but necessary. The northwestern corner of his property, where the land dipped slightly before rising toward the hills, had always seemed different. The soil there was darker, and even in drought, the wild grasses grew a little taller. His grandfather used to say water ran beneath that corner, deep and cool, waiting to be found. "Time to find out if you were spinning tales, Grandpa," Sam said to the empty cabin. He gathered his tools, a shovel worn to a shine from use, a pickaxe with a handle mended 3 times, a length of rope, and 2 wooden buckets patched with pine sap. If there was water to be found, he would find it. A well of his own would mean survival. It might even mean progress. The walk to the northwestern corner took less than 10 minutes. his boots raising small clouds of dust with each step. Sam paused, at the slight depression where the land began its gentle climb. Something about this spot had always called to him, even as a boy. His grandfather would catch him sitting here, staring at the ground as if expecting it to speak. "This land tells stories if you listen close enough," Old Man Tucker would say, ruffling Sam's hair. "Secrets in the soil, boy. Been here long before us, will be here long after." Sam drove his shovel into the earth with a grunt. The soil was hard-packed, but yielded more easily than he expected. He established a perimeter for his well, 4 feet across, and began to dig methodically, scraping away layers of earth and setting them aside. The sun climbed higher, baking his neck and back as he worked. By midday, he had reached 3 feet deep, and sweat soaked his faded blue shirt. He paused only once, to drink lukewarm water from a dented canteen and chew on a piece of jerky. The valley stretched before him, a patchwork of struggling farms and dried creek beds. In the distance, the white columns of Harrington House stood defiantly against the dusty landscape, its green lawns an insulting miracle in a time of drought. "They've got 3 wells and a pump system," Sam muttered. "All I'm asking for is one damn trickle." He returned to his labor with renewed determination. 4 feet deep. 5. The soil changed, becoming sandier, giving him hope. At nearly 6 feet, his shovel struck something with a hollow sound that wasn't stone. Sam froze, then carefully scraped away the surrounding earth. The rounded edge of something appeared. Clay, not rock. He worked more cautiously now, using his hands to brush away dirt from what was clearly a man-made object. Gradually, the form of a large clay pot emerged, its surface etched with faded patterns Sam didn't recognize. It was sealed with a flat stone lid, bound with what looked like tarnished metal bands. "What in heaven's name?" Sam whispered, his parched throat suddenly tight. The pot was heavy, requiring all his strength to lift from its earthen cradle. He set it on the ground beside the hole and stared at it, heart pounding. It wasn't unusual to find Native American artifacts in these hills. Arrowheads and pottery shards turned up in fields all the time. But this was different. This had been buried deliberately, and recently enough that the metal bands hadn't completely corroded. Sam's hands hovered over the stone lid. Every story he'd ever heard about disturbing ancient burials or released curses flashed through his mind. But curiosity and desperation proved stronger than superstition. Nothing to lose anyway, he told himself, and carefully pried at the lid. It resisted, then gave way with a soft, scraping sound. Sam set the stone aside and peered into the darkness of the container. At first, he saw nothing but shadow. Then, as his eyes adjusted, he gasped. The pot was filled to the brim with coins, gold coins that gleamed even in the indirect light. Atop this impossible treasure sat a folded piece of parchment, yellowed with age but intact. With trembling fingers, Sam retrieved the paper and unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was faded but legible, written in a flowing script that spoke of education and purpose. "To whoever finds this cash, what you hold represents the culmination of a lifetime's work and the inheritance of the Harrington legacy. These funds were embezzled from the railroad company and the miners of Willow Creek by my father, Jeremiah Harrington, in 1879. I cannot return them directly without destroying our family name, but neither can I profit from this sin. I leave this to chance and providence. May whoever finds this treasure use it more wisely than my father did in acquiring it, and more bravely than I have in concealing it. With regret and hope, Elizabeth Harrington." April 12, 1901. Sam read the note 3 times, his mind struggling to comprehend what lay before him. The Harringtons had built their fortune on railroad investments and coal speculation, becoming the wealthiest family in 3 counties. Everyone knew that. What no one knew, until now, was that their wealth had been stolen from the very community they claimed to support. And now a portion of that stolen fortune sat in a clay pot at Sam Tucker's feet. His first thought was simple and immediate. His tax problem was solved. His second thought was more complex. This money wasn't just his salvation, but potentially the salvation of all Willow Creek. His third thought was troubling. The current Harringtons, specifically Harrison Harrington III, who ruled the estate with iron-fisted precision, would kill to keep this secret buried. Sam carefully refolded the note and placed it in his shirt pocket. He covered the pot with his jacket and stood, surveying the valley with new eyes. The Harrington house no longer looked impressive. It looked obscene, built on the broken backs of miners and railroad workers who had died poor while the family flourished. "What do I do with this?" Sam whispered to the wind. The sun was beginning its westward descent. He had come looking for water and found gold instead. Water sustained life. Gold transformed it. Both could save or destroy, depending on how they, flowed. Sam covered the hole with brush and marked the spot with an arrangement of 3 stones that would look natural to anyone passing by. The pot was too heavy to carry home in one trip without drawing attention. He would need to return after dark with his father's old cart, hidden in the back of the tool shed for years. As he walked back to his cabin, the weight of the parchment in his pocket felt heavier than any physical burden he'd ever carried. By finding this treasure, he had unearthed something far more significant than gold. He had discovered the rotten foundation upon which Willow Creek's entire social structure was built. Tomorrow would bring decisions that would change everything. But for tonight, Samuel Tucker, the man who had nothing but his hands, now held the power to reshape a future that had always seemed as fixed as the Appalachian Hills themselves. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Night fell over Willow Creek like a velvet curtain, bringing little relief from the day's heat. Samuel Tucker sat at his rickety kitchen table, a single kerosene lamp casting long shadows across the cabin walls. Before him lay a single gold coin, extracted from the pot he'd reburied more securely after retrieving it in the darkness. The coin gleamed with an almost unnatural brightness, its weight substantial in his palm. 1865, he murmured, tracing the date with his thumb. The coin predated even his grandfather's purchase of this land. How many hands had it passed through before being hidden away? How many lives could it change now? Sleep evaded Sam that night. He alternated between exhilaration and dread, making plans only to discard them minutes later. By dawn, he had reached only one firm conclusion. He couldn't tell a soul until he figured out what to do. Not in a town where even whispers had substance and traveled faster than the wind. As morning light filtered through his window, Sam made a decision. He would take one coin into Jessup City, the county seat 20 miles away, to determine its value. The rest would remain hidden until he had a plan. He tucked the single coin into a leather pouch, strung it around his neck, and concealed it. Beneath his shirt, the Tucker property had no automobile, another luxury beyond reach, so Sam walked the 5 miles to the Willow Creek General Store, where the daily bus to Jessup City departed. The store's proprietor, Harold Wilson, raised an eyebrow at Sam's request for a round-trip ticket. "Business in the city, Tucker?" Wilson asked, counting out change from Sam's dollar. "Yidi, banaiti. Thought you'd be working that patch of dust you call a farm." "Doctor's appointment," Sam lied, avoiding eye contact. "Nothing serious." Wilson didn't look convinced, but handed over the ticket anyway. "Bus leaves in 10 minutes. Don't miss it. Next one's not till Thursday." Sam nodded and stepped outside to wait, conscious of the coin resting against his chest. The morning was already hot, the wooden bench outside the store warped from years of similar heat. He sat quietly, nodding to the few other passengers. Mrs. Cooper with her basket of eggs to sell at the city market, young Jimmy Rhodes heading to his job at the telegraph office, and surprisingly, Benjamin Moore, the town's only attorney. Moore, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and meticulous suits despite the heat, rarely left Willow Creek except for court appearances. He gave Sam a curious glance but said nothing as they boarded the bus. The journey to Jessup City passed in uncomfortable silence. Sam watched the landscape transition from failing farms to slightly more prosperous homesteads, then finally to the outskirts of the city itself. Jessup City wasn't large by national standards, but with its paved streets, multi-story buildings, and steady stream of automobiles, it might as well have been New York to someone from Willow Creek. Sam's first stop was Montgomery's Bank and Exchange, the oldest financial institution in the county. The marble-floored lobby made him acutely aware of his dusty boots and patched clothing. A young teller looked up as he approached, her professional smile faltering slightly at his appearance. "How may I help you today, sir?" she asked, emphasizing the "sir" in a way that made it clear she was using the term loosely. Sam reached beneath his shirt and carefully withdrew the coin, placing it on the counter between them. "I'd like to know what this is worth," he said. Quietly, the teller's expression changed instantly. She picked up the coin, examining it closely, then glanced around before leaning forward. "So this is a $20 gold piece, a double eagle. Where did you—" She caught herself. "One moment, please." She disappeared through a door behind the counter, returning moments later with an older man whose tailored suit and silver hair radiated authority. "I'm Walter Montgomery," the man said, extending his hand. "President of Montgomery's Bank. May I ask your name, sir?" "Samuel Tucker," Sam replied, shaking the man's hand with uncertainty. "Mr. Tucker, would you mind stepping into my office for a moment? I believe we might be able to assist you better in private." Sam hesitated, then nodded. The teller handed the coin to Montgomery, who led Sam through the lobby to a wood-paneled office with a view of the street. The door closed with a soft click that nonetheless sounded ominous to Sam's ears. "Please have a seat." Montgomery gestured to a leather chair. Sam perched on the edge, ready to bolt if necessary. "Is there a problem with my coin?" Montgomery smiled, placing the gold piece on the desk between them. "Not at all. It's authentic, in excellent condition. A Liberty Head double eagle, worth $20 in face value." He paused. "However, to collectors, it might be worth considerably more. May I ask where you obtained it?" "Family heirloom," Sam lied. "My grandfather's." Montgomery nodded, not appearing entirely convinced. "Mr. Tucker, I don't believe I've seen you in our bank before. Are you from Jessup City, Willow Creek?" "Ah." Something flickered in Montgomery's eyes. "The Tucker farm, north of town. I believe I'm familiar with the property." Sam shifted uncomfortably. How would a Jessup City banker know his small holding? "Mr. Tucker, forgive my directness, but this is an unusual coin to be circulating these days, especially since President Roosevelt's gold recall last year. Most gold currency has already been surrendered to the government." "I didn't know," Sam said truthfully. The news rarely reached Willow Creek in detail, and banking regulations meant little to people who had nothing to bank. Montgomery studied him for a long moment. "I could exchange this for paper currency, approximately $35 given its collector value, or—" He hesitated. "Perhaps you'd be interested in another arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" "I have a client who collects historical coins, particularly from this region. He would likely pay considerably more than I can offer officially." Montgomery wrote something on a card and slid it across the desk. "He's hosting a gathering at his home this evening. If you're interested, present this card at the gate." Sam picked up the card. Embossed in gold leaf was an address on Hillcrest Avenue, the wealthiest neighborhood in Jessup City, and the name Victor Sullivan. "What makes you think your client would be interested in my coin?" Montgomery's smile didn't reach his eyes. Let's just say Mr. Sullivan has a particular interest in local history, especially relating to Willow Creek. He's been collecting artifacts from the area for years. Sam pocketed the card, his instincts warning him that this was no coincidence. And if I'm not interested? Then take the $35 and consider yourself fortunate. But Mr. Sullivan could potentially offer you much more, especially if you have additional items of similar provenance. The implication hung in the air between them. Sam stood, retrieving his coin from the desk. Thank you for your time, Mr. Montgomery. The gathering begins at 7, Montgomery called, as Sam reached the door. Evening attire is customary, but I'm sure accommodations can be made in your case. Outside the bank, Sam leaned against the building, trying to calm his racing thoughts. There was no way Montgomery could know about the clay pot, yet the banker's interest, his immediate connection to Willow Creek, and this unexpected invitation felt like pieces of a puzzle Sam couldn't quite see. With hours to kill before the mysterious gathering, Sam wandered through Jessup City's downtown. In a second-hand clothing store, he spent $4 on the least shabby suit he could find, navy blue, with only minor wear at the cuffs and a collar that had been mended almost invisibly. A barbershop provided a haircut and his first professional shave in years. As afternoon faded into evening, Sam caught his reflection in a store window and barely recognized himself. The suit, despite being second-hand, transformed him from a dusty farmer into something approximating a gentleman. His newly trimmed hair and smooth jaw completed the illusion. At a small diner, Sam ordered the cheapest meal on the menu and unfolded Montgomery's card again. Victor Sullivan. The name meant nothing to him, but that didn't ease his suspicion. People like the Montgomerys and Sullivans of the world didn't invite people like Samuel Tucker to their homes without reason. By 6:30, curiosity had won over caution. Sam hailed a taxi, another extravagance he'd never before allowed himself, and gave the driver the Hillcrest Avenue address. "Sullivan Place?" the driver asked, raising an eyebrow. "You sure?" "I have an invitation," Sam said, showing the card. The driver whistled low. "Fancy. Sullivan don't entertain much, and when he does, it ain't usually folks from—" He trailed off, glancing at Sam's obviously second-hand suit. The drive took them uphill, away from the bustle of downtown, into streets lined with mansions set back from the road behind ornate gates and manicured lawns. The Sullivan estate was among the largest, a sprawling stone mansion with pillared entrances and windows that blazed with light. Several expensive automobiles were already parked in the circular drive. "Want me to wait?" the driver asked, as they stopped at the gate. "Folks don't usually leave these parties early, but something tells me you might be the exception." Sam hesitated, then nodded. "Please, I won't be long." He approached the gate where a uniformed guard stood. Sam presented Montgomery's card, his heart pounding. The guard examined it, then opened the gate without comment. The gravel path to the main entrance seemed endless. Each step brought Sam closer to something he couldn't define, opportunity or danger, he wasn't sure which. At the massive front door, another uniformed servant greeted him. "Mr. Tucker," the man said, surprising Sam with the use of his name. "Mr. Sullivan is expecting you. Please follow me." The interior of the Sullivan mansion made the bank lobby look modest by comparison. Crystal chandeliers illuminated marble floors, antique furniture, and oil paintings in gilt frames. Despite the dozen or so guests mingling with drinks in hand, the space felt cavernous. Sam followed the servant through the main hall, past curious glances and whispered comments, to a smaller room at the back of the house. The servant knocked once, then opened the door. "Mr. Samuel Tucker, sir," he announced. A man rose from behind a massive desk. He was older than Sam had expected, perhaps in his 70s, with thick white hair and the robust physique of someone who had never known physical labor but maintained himself through leisure sports. His suit probably cost more than Sam's entire farm. "Mr. Tucker," Victor Sullivan said, extending his hand. "I've been waiting a very long time to meet someone from the Tucker family. We have much to discuss about what you found buried on your land." Sam's hand froze midway to Sullivan's extended palm. "I don't know what you're talking about," he managed, fighting to keep his voice steady. Sullivan's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened slightly. "Please, Mr. Tucker, let's not waste valuable time with denials. Walter Montgomery is my cousin. He contacted me the moment you left his bank." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Sit. We have a mutual opportunity to discuss." The door closed behind Sam as the servant departed. The room, lined with bookshelves and display cases containing artifacts and geological specimens, suddenly felt like a trap. "How could you possibly know what I found?" Sam asked, remaining standing. Sullivan moved to a cabinet and poured amber liquid into 2 crystal glasses. "Because I've been searching for that clay pot for 40 years. He offered 1 glass to Sam. "Bourbon? From my private stock. Prohibition may be over, but quality remains elusive." Sam declined with a shake of his head. Sullivan shrugged and set both glasses on his desk before returning to his chair. "Let me tell you a story, Mr. Tucker," he began, his voice taking on a practiced cadence. "In 1879, my grandfather, Edmund Sullivan, was hired by Jeremiah Harrington to execute a significant railroad expansion through Willow Creek Valley. The project would connect the coal mines to the eastern markets, making both men extraordinarily wealthy." Sam remained silent, watching Sullivan carefully. "My grandfather discovered that Harrington was embezzling from the railroad company and stealing wages from the miners. Being an honorable man, he confronted Harrington privately." Sullivan paused to sip his bourbon. 3 days later, my grandfather was found dead, thrown from his horse in what was ruled an unfortunate accident. "What does this have to do with me?" Sam asked. "Patience, Mr. Tucker. After my grandfather's death, his personal diary disappeared. In it, he had documented every detail of Harrington's fraud, including where the stolen money was being kept." Sullivan leaned forward. "Jeremiah Harrington died in 1889, taking his secrets to the grave. But his daughter, Elizabeth, was a woman of conscience, too cowardly to make amends publicly, but too principled to enjoy her ill-gotten inheritance." Sam's hand unconsciously moved to his chest, where the gold coin hung beneath his shirt. "Elizabeth Harrington disappeared for 3 days in April 1901, Sullivan continued. "When she returned, she was different, at peace somehow. 6 months. Later, she fell ill and died. On her deathbed, she told her lady's maid that she had returned what was stolen to the earth from which it came. The maid related this to my father years later." Sullivan stood and moved to a large map mounted on the wall, depicting Willow Creek Valley as it had been in the 1880s. Red pins dotted various locations. "I've been searching every property that Elizabeth Harrington might have accessed during those 3 days in 1901. Your land is the 14th site I've investigated." Sullivan turned to face Sam. "But you saved me the trouble of digging, didn't you?" Sam's mind raced. "If what you say is true, this money was stolen from miners and the railroad. It belongs to them or their descendants, most of whom are dead, Mr. Tucker, and the railroad company was absorbed by larger interests decades ago." Sullivan returned to his desk. "Now, let's discuss the proposition I mentioned." "I'm listening." "The coins you found are double eagles, $20 gold pieces. Depending on their condition and the exact number, we're discussing a substantial sum. However, under Executive Order 6102, private ownership of gold currency is now illegal. You can't simply spend these coins or deposit them in a bank." Sam hadn't considered this complication. The gold that seemed like salvation suddenly posed a new problem. "I, however, have connections with collectors who would pay significantly above face value for such historical pieces, no questions asked." Sullivan pulled a leather-bound ledger from his desk drawer. I propose a partnership. You bring me the coins, I facilitate their sale through my private channels, and we split. The proceeds, 70-30. With you taking 70, Sam guessed. Sullivan smiled thinly. I'm providing the buyers and assuming the legal risk, but I'm not unreasonable. 60-40 then. Sam remained silent, calculating. Sullivan sighed and tried again. 50-50, Mr. Tucker. My final offer. Based on what I know of Elizabeth Harrington's finances in 1901, we're likely discussing coins worth between $15,000 and $20,000 at current market rates. That's $7,000 to $10,000 each. More money than you would earn in a lifetime farming that pitiful plot of land. The sum was staggering. Sam could pay his taxes, buy equipment, hire help, and still have more money than anyone in Willow Creek had seen in generations. Why should I trust you? He finally asked. Because I could have simply sent men to take the coins by force, Sullivan replied bluntly. The fact that we're having this conversation means I prefer to conduct business properly. He paused. And because I have something else you might want. Sullivan opened a drawer and removed a yellowed envelope, sliding it across the desk. This arrived for your grandfather 3 days after his death, the executor of his estate, who happened to be Harrison Harrington II, deemed it unimportant, and it was filed away. My father acquired it decades later among a collection of Harrington papers. Sam hesitantly took the envelope. His grandfather's name was written in faded ink on the front. The seal had been broken long ago. Inside was a single page covered in tight, precise handwriting. Mr. Thomas Tucker, having reviewed your proposal for advanced irrigation techniques on your property, the First National Agricultural Bank of Pennsylvania is pleased to approve your loan application of $5,000. Our engineers have examined your plans and concur that your methods could revolutionize farming in drought-susceptible regions. Funds will be disbursed upon your signature at our Pittsburgh office no later than August 15, 1887. Respectfully, Jonathan W. Pembroke. Loan Officer Sam stared at the letter, stunned. My grandfather died on August 10, 1887. Yes, Sullivan nodded. 5 days before he was to receive funding that would have transformed your family's fortunes and potentially the agricultural prospects of the entire valley. Curious timing, wouldn't you say? Are you suggesting the Harringtons had something to do with my grandfather's death? I'm suggesting that Jeremiah Harrington and his son ensured that no one threatened their control over Willow Creek Valley. Not my grandfather with his ethics, nor yours with his innovations. Sullivan refilled his glass. They built their empire by destroying others and keeping the rest dependent. Even today, Harrison Harrington III controls the town by owning the water rights, the supply store, and holding mortgages on half the farms. The revelation sent Sam's mind spinning. His family's poverty hadn't been bad luck or poor farming. It had been engineered, a deliberate destruction of potential that might have challenged Harrington dominance. What exactly do you want, Mr. Sullivan? Sam asked, his voice hardened by new understanding. Justice, Mr. Tucker, and profit. I won't pretend otherwise. Sullivan leaned back in his chair. Bring me the coins within 3 days. I'll arrange their sale and transfer your share to an account in your name. Use it however you wish. Save your farm, leave Willow Creek. It matters not to me. And if I refuse? Sullivan's smile disappeared. Then I inform Harrison Harrington III about your discovery. He'll claim the coins belong to his family, regardless of how they were acquired. The sheriff, whose campaign Harrington finances, will agree. You'll be arrested for theft, your property confiscated, and the cycle of Harrington control will continue. The threat hung in the air between them. Sam carefully refolded his grandfather's letter and placed it in his pocket. 3 days, Sullivan repeated. My driver will take you back to Willow Creek tonight and return for your answer. Choose wisely, Mr. Tucker. As if on cue, the door opened, and the servant reappeared. "Your car is ready, sir." Sam nodded stiffly to Sullivan and followed the servant through the mansion. The other guests paid him no attention now, their initial curiosity satisfied or dismissed. Outside, a black Packard idled in the circular drive, its driver standing at attention beside the rear door. The night air felt cool against Sam's face after the stifling tension of Sullivan's study. As the car pulled away from the mansion, Sam watched the lighted windows recede into the distance. The driver remained silent as they wound down Hillcrest Avenue and through the darkened streets of Jessup City. Eventually, they left the paved roads behind, the Packard's headlights cutting through the rural darkness. Sam's mind churned with all he had learned, his grandfather's thwarted innovation, Sullivan's vendetta against the Harringtons, the fateful letter that never reached its intended recipient. "Mr. Sullivan expects an answer by Friday," the driver finally spoke as they approached the outskirts of Willow Creek. "I'll return at noon." "I understand," Sam replied. The driver stopped at the crossroads near Wilson's General Store. "Will you need assistance returning to your property, sir?" "No, I know these roads blindfolded." Sam stepped out of the car, his borrowed suit incongruous against the dusty country crossroads. The Packard's headlights illuminated him for a moment before the vehicle turned around and disappeared back toward Jessup City. The walk to his cabin took nearly an hour. Each step felt weighted with the decisions before him. Sullivan's offer promised wealth, but at the cost of partnership with a man whose motives remained suspect. Refusing meant facing Harrington's wrath and losing everything, but there was a third option forming in Sam's mind, one neither Sullivan nor Harrington had considered. The clay pot remained buried where he had hidden it, undisturbed beneath the old oak at the edge of his property. Sam bypassed his cabin and headed directly to the tree, guided by starlight and memory. Kneeling in the dirt, he carefully excavated his treasure. The coins gleamed dully in the moonlight as he opened the pot. After a moment's hesitation, Sam removed a single coin and returned the pot to its hiding place, covering it carefully. That one coin would buy him time and something far more valuable: information. As dawn approached, Samuel Tucker sat at his kitchen table, a plan taking shape that would change not just his future, but the future of every person in Willow Creek. Sullivan and Harrington had both underestimated him, a mistake powerful men often made when dealing with those they considered beneath them. 3 days, he whispered to himself, time enough to start a revolution. Morning arrived with the harsh persistence of late summer, sunlight streaming through Sam's window and illuminating the dust motes that danced in the still air. He had barely slept, his mind too occupied with formulating his plan. The gold coin lay on the table before him, a physical reminder of decisions that could no longer be postponed. Sam's first stop was the home of Jacob Miller, Willow Creek's unofficial historian and the only teacher at the one-room schoolhouse. Despite the early hour, Miller was already on his porch, white hair uncombed, spectacles perched on his nose as he reviewed student papers. "Samuel Tucker," Miller greeted him, looking up with mild surprise. "What brings you to my doorstep at this hour? And in a suit, no less. Need your help, Mr. Miller. Your knowledge, specifically." Sam climbed the porch steps and lowered his voice. "What do you know about Thomas Tucker, my grandfather, and his relationship with the Harringtons?" Miller's bushy eyebrows rose. "An unexpected question before my morning coffee." He gestured to a chair. "Sit. I'll tell you what I know, though I'm curious about your sudden interest in ancient history." For the next hour, Miller filled in the gaps of Sam's understanding. Thomas Tucker had indeed been an innovator, among the first in the region, to propose crop rotation, water conservation techniques, and communal irrigation systems that would have benefited all the local farmers, not just the wealthy landowners. "Your grandfather believed farming wasn't about competition but cooperation," Miller explained. He envisioned Willow Creek becoming a model agricultural community where resources were managed collectively. The Harringtons saw this as a threat to their control. And his death? Sam asked carefully. Miller's face darkened. Officially, he fell from a windmill during repairs. Unofficially, he glanced around, lowering his voice further. There were rumors. Thomas had no fear of heights, had been climbing that windmill for years. Some said the support beams had been tampered with. Was there an investigation? By whom? The sheriff was appointed by the county commissioner, who was Harrison Harrington II's brother-in-law. Miller sighed. That's how it's always been in Willow Creek, son. The Harringtons own the land, the law, and enough of the people to keep things exactly as they want them. Sam nodded, absorbing this confirmation of Sullivan's claims. What about the other families who've been here generations? The Wilsons, the Clarks, the Jenkinses? How have they survived under Harrington rule? Compromise, submission, taking just enough to live without challenging the established order. Miller studied Sam carefully. Why all these questions, son? What's changed? Sam chose his words cautiously. Let's just say I've found something that might change the balance of power in Willow Creek. Miller's expression grew serious. Be careful, Samuel. Powerful men like Harrison Harrington III don't relinquish control easily. Whatever you found... I haven't said I found anything, Sam interrupted. You didn't have to. Miller tapped his temple. These old eyes see more than folks realize. You've got the look of a man who's discovered something significant. Just remember, if you plan to take on the Harringtons, you'll need allies. Sam left Miller's house with more questions than answers, but a clearer sense of purpose. His next stop was the tiny law office of Benjamin Moore, the attorney he'd seen on the bus to Jessup City. Moore's surprise at Sam's appearance was even more pronounced than Miller's had been. Mr. Tucker, this is unexpected. I don't believe you've ever required my services before. That changes today, Sam replied, taking a seat across from Moore's cluttered desk. I need information about legal ownership of found property, specifically historical artifacts of significant value. Moore removed his spectacles, cleaning them methodically with a handkerchief. This wouldn't happen to relate to your sudden trip to Jessup City yesterday, would it? Or your equally sudden acquisition of a suit? News traveled fast in Willow Creek. Sam wasn't surprised. Let's speak hypothetically, Sam suggested. If someone discovered valuable items buried on their property, items that might have been misappropriated generations ago, who would have legal claim to them? Moore replaced his spectacles, his expression thoughtful. Hypothetically speaking, found property belongs to the finder if it was abandoned, or to the owner of the land where it was found, assuming the items weren't stolen. And if they were, that complicates matters. If the original owners or their heirs could prove the items were stolen, they might have a claim, but after several generations, with no documentation, exceedingly difficult. Moore leaned forward. Mr. Tucker, are we still speaking hypothetically? Sam ignored the question. What about gold, with the new executive order? Understanding dawned on Moore's face. Hypothetically, gold currency found buried from a previous era would need to be surrendered to the federal government under Executive Order 6102. However, he lowered his voice. Many collectors continue to trade such items discreetly. The government has bigger concerns than small amounts of historical gold changing hands. And the Harringtons? Could they claim ownership of something found on my property based on their historical control of the area? Moore's eyebrows shot up. They could try, but without specific documentation linking the items to their family, such a claim would be tenuous at best. He studied Sam intently. Mr. Tucker, whatever you've found, I strongly advise you to proceed with extreme caution. Harrison Harrington III doesn't need legal standing to make life difficult for those who cross him. Sam nodded, rising to leave. One more question. What would it take to establish a community trust? Something that could hold assets for the benefit of everyone in Willow Creek. Moore blinked in surprise. I could draw up the necessary papers in a day or two, but such an entity would need funding, management, a charter defining its purpose. He trailed off, studying Sam with new interest. What exactly are you planning? Thank you for your time, Mr. Moore, Sam replied, avoiding the question. I may return to discuss this further. By midday, Sam had spoken with 4 more town residents, careful to phrase his questions hypothetically while gathering the information he needed. He learned that the Willow Creek water system, controlled by Harrington Enterprises, was barely functional and wildly overpriced. The general store's monopoly forced farmers to pay inflated prices for essential supplies. The local bank, partially owned by Harrison Harrington III, charged exorbitant interest rates that kept most families perpetually in debt. The pieces were coming together. Sam returned to his cabin to prepare for Sullivan's driver, who would arrive within the hour. He changed back into his work clothes, hiding the suit carefully in his trunk. The gold coin went back into its leather pouch around his neck. At precisely noon, the black Packard appeared on the dirt road leading to Sam's property. The driver, expressionless as before, stepped out and waited silently beside the vehicle. Sam emerged from his cabin and approached slowly. Mr. Sullivan sent me for your answer, the driver stated flatly. I need to speak with him directly, Sam replied. That wasn't the arrangement. It is now. Sam met the driver's gaze steadily. Tell Mr. Sullivan I accept his proposition, but with conditions that I will only discuss in person. I'll bring proof of the coin's existence. The driver's expression didn't change, but Sam sensed his displeasure. After a moment he nodded curtly. Get in. Mr. Sullivan won't appreciate having his schedule disrupted. The return journey to Jessup City passed in tense silence. Sam watched. The familiar landscape of failing farms and dusty roads give way to the relative prosperity of the county seat. The contrast had never seemed so stark, nor the reasons behind it so clear. Sullivan's mansion appeared even more imposing in daylight, its stone facade and manicured grounds a testament to generations of wealth. The driver escorted Sam directly to Sullivan's study, where the older man was engaged in a telephone conversation. He gestured impatiently for Sam to sit while he finished his call. 50 shares, not a penny less, Sullivan barked into the receiver, before hanging up abruptly. He turned his attention to Sam, his expression a mixture of annoyance and curiosity. My driver says you've accepted my offer, but with conditions. I don't recall leaving room for negotiation, Mr. Tucker. Sam reached beneath his shirt and withdrew the leather pouch, removing the single gold coin and placing it on Sullivan's desk. One piece from the collection, as proof of good faith. Sullivan picked up the coin, examining it with the practiced eye of a collector. Excellent condition, 1865 San Francisco mint. He set it down again. But this hardly constitutes accepting my offer. Where are the rest? Secured, Sam replied. And they'll remain that way until we reach an agreement that serves both our interests. Sullivan's eyes narrowed. I don't think you understand your position, Mr. Tucker. I could have my men search your property and find these coins within hours. I could try, Sam acknowledged. But after my conversations in town this morning, several people would find it very interesting if Sullivan men were suddenly digging up Tucker land. Jacob Miller for one, Benjamin Moore for another. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Sullivan's face. You've been busy. I've been educative, Sam corrected, learning about my grandfather's innovations that threatened the Harringtons, about how they've systematically controlled Willow Creek for generations, keeping everyone dependent and desperate, about how the coins I found represent stolen wealth that should have benefited the entire community. Sullivan leaned back in his chair, reassessing the man before him. What exactly are you proposing? A modified arrangement, Sam said, leaning forward. I'll bring you the coins, all of them, for sale through your connections. But instead of splitting the proceeds, 80% will go into a community trust for Willow Creek. The remaining 20% will be yours as commission. Sullivan laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. You can't be serious. I'm not a philanthropist. Mr. Tucker. No, you're a businessman with a vendetta against the Harringtons, Sam replied calmly. This arrangement gives you something money can't buy, the satisfaction of dismantling their control over Willow Creek, piece by piece. Sullivan fell silent, studying Sam with newfound respect. And what would this community trust do, exactly? Fund infrastructure independent of Harrington control, provide loans at reasonable rates to help farmers modernize their equipment, implement the irrigation systems my grandfather designed. Sam met Sullivan's gaze steadily. Break the cycle of dependency that's kept Willow Creek under Harrington's thumb for generations. And your role in all this, surely you're not giving away a fortune out of pure altruism. I'll manage the trust, ensure the money goes where it's needed most. Sam paused. And yes, I'll take a modest salary for my work, enough to save my farm and implement my grandfather's innovations. Not wealth, Mr. Sullivan, but purpose. Sullivan rose and moved to the window, gazing out at his immaculate grounds. For several minutes he said nothing, weighing the proposal against his own ambitions and grudges. 70% to the trust, he finally said. 30% to me, and I want quarterly reports on how the money is being used, especially any projects that directly compete with Harrington interests. Sam considered the counteroffer. 75-25, and you'll get your reports. Additionally, I want your help establishing the legal framework that protects the trust from Harrington interference. Sullivan turned back to face him. You drive a hard bargain for a farmer. Mr. Tucker. I've had good teachers, Sam replied. Necessity, desperation, and recently opportunity. After another long moment, Sullivan nodded. Very well. 75-25. Bring the coins tomorrow, and I'll have my attorneys draw up the necessary papers. He extended his hand. Do we have an agreement? Sam rose and shook Sullivan's hand firmly. We do. As he left the mansion, walking down the long gravel drive toward the waiting Packard, Sam felt the weight of generations lifting from his shoulders. He had entered this negotiation as Samuel Tucker, struggling farmer. He would leave it as the architect of Willow Creek's rebirth. The revolution had begun with a clay pot buried in forgotten soil, and it would continue with the seeds of change about to be planted throughout the valley. The return journey to Willow Creek passed in contemplative silence. As the Packard navigated the dusty roads, Sam gazed out at the parched fields and struggling farms with new eyes. Every water-starved crop, every sagging roof, every fence in need of repair now represented not just individual hardship, but a systematic failure that his actions might begin to remedy. The driver dropped him at the crossroads near Wilson's General Store. Mr. Sullivan expects you tomorrow afternoon with the full collection, he reminded Sam before driving away. Sam nodded, then stood watching the cloud of dust settle in the Packard's wake. The general store's porch hosted its usual collection of idle men, their curious gazes following him as he approached. Twice in 2 days you're riding in fancy cars, Tucker, called Hank Wilson, the store owner's brother. Winning at cards or selling that worthless land of yours? The other men chuckled, but Sam detected the genuine curiosity beneath their mockery. Just handling some business, he replied vaguely. Must be mighty important business to have Victor Sullivan's driver ferrying you around, another man observed. That old vulture doesn't waste time on nobody unless there's profit involved. Sam paused on the bottom step of the porch. Any of you remember my grandfather, Thomas Tucker? The question silenced the casual banter. The oldest man present, Elmer Jenkins, nodded slowly. "I was just a boy when he died, but I remember him. Tall fellow, always talking about new farming methods. Pa said he was either a genius or a madman, maybe both. He was ahead of his time," Sam said. "Had plans for irrigation systems that could have helped every farm in the valley, not just the big operations." Elmer snorted. "Wouldn't have mattered. Harringtons control the water rights. Always have. What if they didn't?" Sam asked, his voice low but clear. The men exchanged glances, uncomfortable with the directness of the question. Challenging Harrington authority wasn't something discussed openly in Willow Creek. "Better watch yourself, Tucker," Hank Wilson warned, though without hostility. "Folks who talk about changing the way things are don't tend to prosper around here." Sam nodded, understanding their caution. "Just something to think about," he said, continuing on his way. He had planted a seed, a small one, but sometimes that was all it took. The remainder of the day passed in careful preparation. Sam retrieved the clay pot from its hiding place, counting the coins inside. 732 double eagles, each worth at least $20 in face value, potentially much more to collectors. The total was higher than Sullivan had estimated, closer to $30,000 at minimum market rates. With the 75% allocated to the community trust, Willow Creek would have over $22,000 to begin its transformation. The thought was dizzying. Sam wrapped each coin carefully in cloth strips, then packed them in layers inside a modified seed bag that he reinforced with leather straps. The bag was heavy, nearly 40 pounds, but manageable. He concealed it beneath the floorboards of his cabin for the night. Sleep remained elusive. Sam lay on his narrow bed, watching moonlight trace patterns on the cabin ceiling, his mind filled with possibilities. By morning he had sketched rough plans for the Trust's first projects, a community well independent of Harrington control, equipment sharing among smaller farms, repairs to the schoolhouse, and funding for Jacob Miller to expand educational offerings beyond basic reading and arithmetic. The next day dawned clear and hot. Sam dressed in his ordinary work clothes, but tucked his grandfather's irrigation designs into his pocket, a talisman of sorts, connecting past vision to future possibility. At noon, he retrieved the coin-filled bag, secured his cabin, and began the 5-mile walk to the crossroads where Sullivan's driver would meet him. He was halfway there when he noticed the dust cloud approaching from the direction of town. A black automobile appeared, but not Sullivan's Packard. This was a newer model with the distinctive grille of a Cadillac. Sam stepped to the side of the road as the vehicle slowed beside him. The rear window rolled down, revealing Harrison Harrington, third himself, a man Sam had seen only at a distance before. In his early 60s, Harrington maintained the robust physique of someone who had never known hunger or excessive physical labor. His silver hair was immaculately styled, his suit crisp. "Despite the heat, Mr. Tucker," Harrington said, his voice carrying the polished accent of Eastern education, "I believe you have something that belongs to my family." Sam's grip tightened on the bag's straps. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Harrington." Harrington's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Let's not play games. Victor Sullivan may think he's being discreet, but he's been searching for my grandfather's misplaced funds for decades. Word travels quickly when a man like you suddenly attracts Sullivan's attention." The driver had exited the vehicle and now stood menacingly beside Sam. Another man emerged from the passenger seat, wearing the sheriff's badge. "Sheriff Denton here has a warrant to search your property," Harrington continued smoothly. "But we can avoid all that unpleasantness if you simply hand over what you found. I'm prepared to be generous, say $500 for your trouble." Sam assessed his options rapidly. The sheriff was Harrington's man, that much was clear. Refusing would mean arrest, and the coins would be confiscated. Fighting was futile against armed men. Running was impossible. "May I see the warrant?" He asked, playing for time. Sheriff Denton produced a folded document from his pocket. Sam set his bag down carefully and took the paper, examining it with deliberate slowness. The language was legal and incomprehensible to him, but one detail stood out. The document authorized a search of Samuel Tucker's property for stolen Harrington family artifacts. "This authorizes a search of my land," Sam noted. "We're currently standing on county property, the public road, and the items in question aren't on my farm anymore." Harrington's expression hardened. "Where are they?" "Safe," Sam replied, "and accompanied by documentation proving they represent funds embezzled by your grandfather from the railroad company and local miners." Elizabeth Harrington's own confession. This was a calculated bluff. The note Sam had found acknowledged the embezzlement but contained no details that would stand up in court. Still, Harrington's momentary hesitation suggested the family had always feared such evidence might exist. "Lies," Harrington said, though with less certainty. "My grandfather was a visionary who built this valley's economy by stealing from those who did the actual building," Sam countered. "The truth will make for interesting reading in the Jessup City Chronicle. I wonder how your business associates will react." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Harrington and Sam. This public confrontation was clearly not what he had signed up for. Harrington studied Sam with new calculation. "What exactly do you want, Tucker? Everyone has a price." "Justice," Sam answered simply. "For my grandfather, for the miners, for every family in Willow Creek that struggled while you prospered from stolen wealth." "Noble sentiments," Harrington scoffed. "But practically speaking, what's your price to keep this matter private?" 1,000. 2. Sam shook his head. "No amount of money will buy my silence, but I am willing to negotiate terms that benefit the community." Harrington's eyes narrowed. "You presume to negotiate with me? A dirt farmer with delusions of grandeur?" "A dirt farmer with evidence of your family's crimes and a plan to correct decades of exploitation." Sam met Harrington's gaze steadily. "I'm establishing a community trust for Willow Creek with funds recovered from your grandfather's embezzlement. You can fight this publicly, messily, with all your family's sins exposed, or you can contribute to making amends." For a moment, genuine surprise registered on Harrington's face, quickly replaced by calculation. "You're either remarkably brave or catastrophically foolish." "I've been called worse," Sam replied. "My offer is simple. Match the funds I'm placing in the trust, and I'll ensure the origins of the money remain confidential. The focus will be on building Willow Creek's future, not exposing its past." Sheriff Denton cleared his throat. "Mr. Harrington, perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere less public." Indeed, several farmhands working in an adjacent field had stopped to watch the confrontation, too distant to hear the exchange, but close enough to recognize the principles involved. Harrington's jaw tightened as he considered his options. "Get in the car, Tucker. We'll discuss this at my office." "I have another appointment," Sam declined. "Sullivan's driver will be at the crossroads in 30 minutes. I suggest we all meet tomorrow morning at Benjamin Moore's law office in town, 10 o'clock. Bring your checkbook and legal counsel if you wish." The audacity of this directive from a man Harrington had always considered insignificant was clearly infuriating, but decades of business negotiations had taught the elder man to control his expressions. 10 o'clock, Harrington agreed coldly. "But understand this, if you're bluffing about the documentation, there won't be enough left of your worthless farm to bury you in." The Cadillac departed in a deliberate spray of dust and gravel. Sam watched it disappear toward town, his heart racing despite his outward calm. He had just challenged the most powerful man in the county with nothing but a partial truth and desperate courage. The next 24 hours would determine whether he'd won a new future for Willow Creek or sealed his own destruction. Sullivan's Packard arrived precisely at the appointed time. The driver raised an eyebrow at Sam's dusty appearance, but asked no questions as they began the journey to Jessup City. At Sullivan's mansion, Sam was escorted directly to the study, where the older man waited with an attorney and what appeared to be a coin appraiser, a balding man with jeweler's loops and cotton gloves laid out on the desk. "Mr. Tucker," Sullivan greeted him, "I trust you've brought the complete collection." Sam placed the bag on the desk. "All 732 coins, as promised. Before we proceed, there's been a development you should know about." He described the encounter with Harrington, leaving out no detail. Sullivan's expression darkened. "I should have anticipated this. Harrington has informants everywhere." He drummed his fingers on the desk, thinking, "This complicates our arrangement." "It strengthens it," Sam corrected. "Harrington is now aware that his family's crimes could become public. He'll contribute to the trust rather than risk exposure." The attorney looked alarmed. "Mr. Sullivan, this borders on extortion." "It borders on justice," Sullivan replied, surprising both the attorney and Sam with his support. "Harrison Harrington III has built his empire on his grandfather's stolen fortune, just as I've built mine on legitimate business. The difference matters." He turned to Sam. "You've shown unexpected backbone, Mr. Tucker. I find I rather admire it." Sullivan nodded to the appraiser. "Proceed with the evaluation. Mr. Tucker and I need to modify our agreement to account for these new circumstances." For the next hour, the appraiser meticulously examined each coin while Sullivan and his attorney drafted revised terms for their arrangement. The community trust would now include provisions for Harrington's contribution, with specific language preventing any controlling interest regardless of donation size. "The coins are authentic," the appraiser finally announced, "in exceptional condition, likely from being properly sealed in the clay container. At current collector rates, the full set would fetch approximately $36,500. Sullivan nodded, satisfied. "I can have buyers lined up within a week. According to our agreement, that's $27,375 for the Willow Creek Community Trust and $9,125 for my services." He signed the modified agreement and slid it across to Sam. "Plus whatever you extract from Harrington tomorrow." Sam signed without hesitation, the scratching of his pen on paper marking the moment his life and the future of Willow Creek changed irrevocably. "I'll need to return to Willow Creek tonight," Sam said, "to prepare for tomorrow's meeting." Sullivan studied him thoughtfully. "You've started something significant, Mr. Tucker. The Harringtons won't surrender control easily, even with threats of exposure." "I'm counting on it," Sam replied. "Easy victories rarely last. This needs to be a fundamental shift in how Willow Creek operates, not just a change in who holds the power." As the Packard returned him to the crossroads near Wilson's General Store, Sam felt lighter despite the challenges ahead. The bag that had held the coins was empty now, but his mind was full of possibilities. Tomorrow would bring confrontation with Harrington, but tonight belonged to preparation and possibility. The future of Willow Creek balanced on the edge of transformation, pushed there by a simple farmer who had dug for water and found justice. Instead, dawn broke over Willow Creek with unusual activity. Word of Samuel Tucker's confrontation with Harrison Harrington III had spread through the community with the efficiency that only small-town gossip networks can achieve. By sunrise, speculative conversations were occurring over breakfast tables throughout the valley. Sam rose early after another restless night, his mind occupied with preparation for the upcoming meeting. He dressed in his second-hand suit, no longer for impression, but for the armor of dignity it provided. In his pocket, he carried 3 items: Elizabeth Harrington's confession, his grandfather's irrigation designs, and a handwritten list of proposed Community improvements. As he walked toward town, Sam noticed something unexpected. People were watching him, not with the usual dismissive glances reserved for a struggling farmer, but with curiosity, speculation, and in some cases, something approaching hope. News had spread not just of the confrontation, but of rumors about a community trust that might challenge Harrington's stranglehold on local resources. The law office of Benjamin Moore sat between the general store and the barber shop, its modest facade distinguished only by a painted wooden sign. Sam arrived 20 minutes early to find Moore already waiting, his usual meticulous appearance somewhat disheveled from hasty preparation. "Mr. Tucker," Moore greeted him, ushering him inside. "I've had quite the unusual morning. Harrison Harrington's attorney telephoned at dawn, requesting my office for this meeting, followed by Victor Sullivan's legal representative calling to confirm their participation." He adjusted his spectacles nervously. "Perhaps you'd care to explain why Willow Creek's most inconsequential farmer has suddenly commanded the attention of the two most powerful men in the county." Sam smiled slightly. "I found something buried on my land, Mr. Moore, something that's forcing a reckoning decades overdue." Before Moore could inquire further, the office door opened to admit Victor Sullivan, accompanied by his attorney and the same driver who had transported Sam over the previous days. Sullivan nodded curtly to Sam before taking a seat near the window, positioning himself to observe the proceedings without immediately participating. Minutes later, the distinctive sound of Harrington's Cadillac announced the arrival of the final participants. Harrison Harrington III entered with the measured steps of a man accustomed to controlling rooms simply by his presence. Behind him came a severe-looking man carrying a leather portfolio, clearly his attorney, followed by Sheriff Denton, who positioned himself near the door like a sentry. "Quite the gathering," Harrington observed coolly, his gaze moving from Sullivan to Sam before settling on Benjamin Moore. "I trust your office can accommodate our need for privacy, Mr. Moore." "Of course, Mr. Harrington," Moore replied, closing the blinds and door. "No one will disturb us." An uncomfortable silence descended as the participants arranged themselves around the small office. Sam remained standing, acutely aware of the power dynamics at play. Sullivan's presence gave him some leverage, but Harrington's influence in Willow Creek remained paramount. "Let's dispense with preliminaries," Harrington said finally. "Mr. Tucker claims to possess evidence of improprieties committed by my grandfather nearly 50 years ago. I'm here to resolve this matter quietly and efficiently." He nodded to his attorney, who opened the portfolio. "I'm prepared to offer $5,000 for any artifacts or documents in Mr. Tucker's possession, with the understanding that this concludes all claims against the Harrington family." Sam shook his head. "That's not why we're here." 10,000, Harrington countered immediately. "Far more than a failing farm is worth." "This isn't about me or my farm," Sam replied. "It's about Willow Creek, the community your family has controlled and exploited for generations." Harrington's expression hardened. "Careful, Tucker. Slander has legal consequences." "It's not slander if it's true," Sullivan interjected smoothly, speaking for the first time. "And young Mr. Tucker has proof of Jeremiah Harrington's embezzlement, written by your great-aunt, Elizabeth herself." Sam removed Elizabeth's confession from his pocket and handed it to Benjamin Moore. "This was found with a collection of gold. Coins buried on my property. Coins representing funds stolen from the railroad company and the miners of Willow Creek in 1879. Moore read the note carefully, his legal mind assessing its implications. "This alone wouldn't constitute definitive legal proof after so many years," he observed, "but the combination of this document with the discovery of gold coins certainly raises questions that could prove embarrassing if made public." Harrington's attorney leaned forward. "The statute of limitations Doesn't apply in the court of public opinion, Sullivan cut in. Imagine the headlines in the Jessup City Chronicle. Harrington fortune built on stolen miners' wages. Your banking partners in Pittsburgh might reconsider their associations. Harrington remained outwardly calm, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. What exactly do you want, Tucker? State your terms clearly. Sam placed his list of proposals on Moore's desk. The establishment of the Willow Creek Community Trust, with initial funding equivalent to the value of the recovered coins, approximately $27,000. You will match this amount as the Harrington family's contribution to community development. Preposterous, Harrington scoffed. $54,000 for vague community development, based on an unverifiable claim about my grandfather's business practices. Not vague at all, Sam continued undeterred. Specific projects, an independent water system serving all farms in the valley, implementation of modern irrigation techniques, equipment sharing cooperatives, repairs to public buildings, educational expansion, and fair rate loans for small landholders. He turned to the final item on his list, and the return of water rights to public ownership, ending Harrington Enterprises' monopoly on the resource every farm needs to survive. The room fell silent. Sullivan's eyebrows rose slightly in appreciation of the boldness of this demand. Moore cleared his throat nervously. That's not a negotiation, Harrington said coldly. That's an attempt at extortion backed by character assassination of a dead man. It's an opportunity, Sam corrected, to correct historical wrongs while preserving your family's public reputation. The trust documents won't mention the origins of the funds, only that the Harrington family has generously contributed to Willow Creek's development. Sullivan nodded appreciatively at this approach. Quite clever, actually. You maintain your standing in the community while divesting yourself of the moral burden your grandfather left behind. Harrington's attorney leaned close, whispering urgently in his client's ear. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably by the door, his expression suggesting he was reconsidering his role in this confrontation. After a long moment, Harrington spoke with calculated precision. I could destroy you, Tucker. One word from me and you'd never work another day in this valley. Your mortgage could be called in tomorrow, your property seized for unpaid taxes. You could try, Sam acknowledged, but the documents describing your grandfather's crimes and your family's systematic exploitation of Willow Creek are already in safekeeping with instructions for their publication should anything happen to me. This was another calculated bluff. No such comprehensive documentation existed, but the uncertainty in Harrington's eyes suggested the possibility had struck home. The gold coins have already been secured, Sullivan added, reinforcing Sam's position. Their sale proceeds are being held in escrow for the community trust. That part of the equation is settled, regardless of your decision today. Harrington rose and moved to the window, pushing aside the blinds to gaze out at the main street of Willow Creek. Outside, an unusual number of townspeople lingered near the law office, their presence a silent statement of interest in the proceedings. Within, 50,000, Harrington said finally, turning back to face the room. Not 54, that's my final offer. Sam glanced at Sullivan, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. Accepted, Sam replied. With conditions. The funds will be transferred to the trust by the end of the week. Water rights will be legally returned to public ownership within 30 days. And you'll appoint a Harrington representative to the trust's board, someone who will work constructively toward community improvement. My daughter, Catherine, Harrington said, after a moment's consideration. She's recently returned from college with impractical ideas about corporate responsibility. This should provide an educational outlet for her reformist tendencies. Sam nodded, recognizing the concession beneath the dismissive tone. Catherine Harrington was known to hold progressive views at odds with her father's business practices. Benjamin Moore, who had been taking notes throughout the exchange, looked up. I can draft the necessary documents by tomorrow. The trust will need a name for the official charter. The Thomas Tucker Memorial Community Trust, Sam said without hesitation. Harrington's eyes narrowed at this small victory, but he nodded curtly. Have the papers ready for my attorney's review by noon tomorrow. If they're acceptable, the funds will be transferred from the Harrington accounts by Friday. The meeting concluded with terse handshakes and careful formality. As Harrington and his entourage departed, Sullivan approached Sam with newfound respect. You played that masterfully, Tucker. I came expecting to rescue you from Harrington's machinations, but you handled him like a seasoned negotiator. Sam smiled faintly. Desperation makes for a quick education, and I had good teachers, including you. Sullivan laughed. I suppose I did provide some valuable lessons in leverage. His expression turned serious. Be careful, though. Harrington won't forget this defeat, even if he's disguised it as philanthropic contribution. He'll look for ways to control the trust through his daughter, or undermine its projects indirectly. I'm counting on it, Sam replied. That's why the trust needs strong community involvement from the beginning. Too many stakeholders for even Harrison Harrington to manipulate them all. After Sullivan departed, Benjamin Moore regarded Sam with new assessment. In 20 years of legal practice in Willow Creek, I've never seen anyone successfully challenge the Harringtons. Yet you managed it with nothing but a clay pot and remarkable courage. Not courage, Sam corrected. Necessity. My grandfather died trying to improve this valley for everyone. I nearly died slowly watching my land wither under Harrington control. Sometimes desperation is more powerful than money. Outside the law office, the gathered townspeople watched with curious eyes as the various participants departed. Sam emerged. Last, blinking in the bright sunlight, Jacob Miller approached from the small crowd. Is it true? The old teacher asked quietly. You're establishing a community trust? Sam nodded. With Harrington matching funds, $50,000 to rebuild. Willow Creek the way it should have been all along. A murmur spread through the onlookers. For most, this sum represented an unimaginable amount, more money than many would earn in their lifetimes. There'll be a meeting at the schoolhouse tomorrow evening, Sam announced, raising his voice to address the gathering. Everyone's invited. This trust belongs to all of us, every family, every farm, every business in the valley. It's time we built the community my grandfather envisioned. As he walked back toward his cabin, Sam felt the weight of what he had initiated. The confrontation with Harrington had been merely the first step in a transformation that would require sustained effort and community participation. The clay pot had provided the spark, but keeping the flame alive would demand more than money. It would require healing the wounds of generations of dependency and rebuilding trust among people long conditioned to look out only for themselves. At the crossroads, Sam paused to look back at the town and the valley beyond. For the first time since his childhood, he saw not what Willow Creek was, a struggling community in the shadow of Harrington control, but what it could become, a model of rural cooperation and shared prosperity. The path ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in generations, it was open. All because he had dug for water and found justice buried in the soil of his ancestors. The schoolhouse buzzed with an energy Willow Creek hadn't witnessed in decades. Every bench was filled, with additional townsfolk standing along the walls, and even peering through the windows from outside. Jacob Miller had arranged the room as best he could, placing a small table at the front where Sam now stood beside Benjamin Moore, facing what appeared to be the entire adult population of the valley. Thank you all for coming, Sam began, his voice steady despite his nerves. Public speaking had never been his forte, but necessity continued to push him beyond his former limitations. Most of you have heard rumors about what's happening. Tonight, I want to share the complete truth. Over the next half hour, Sam recounted the discovery of the clay pot, the meeting with Sullivan, the confrontation with Harrington, and the establishment of the Thomas Tucker Memorial Community Trust. He explained the dual funding sources, the proceeds from the gold coins and Harrington's matching contribution, without detailing the origins of the coins or the leverage used to secure Harrington's participation. Some truths were better left implied than stated outright. $50,000, he concluded, not to be spent all at once, but invested in projects that will free Willow Creek from dependency and create sustainable prosperity for everyone. The room erupted in a mixture of excited conversation, skeptical questions, and outright disbelief. Benjamin Moore stood to address the legal aspects, explaining the trust's structure and the planned return of water rights to public ownership. Takao, trust will be managed by a board of 7 community members, Moore explained, with 1 seat reserved for Catherine Harrington as the family representative. The other 6 positions will be elected by community vote tonight, with terms staggered to ensure continuity. A weathered farmer near the back raised his hand. "Why should we trust you, Tucker? No offense, but you've never managed more than 6 acres, and poorly at that. Now you're going to decide how to spend enough money to buy half the valley." The question stung, but Sam acknowledged its legitimacy. "I don't expect blind trust, Mr. Phillips. That's why the decisions won't be mine alone, but made by elected representatives. You choose tonight. My grandfather had a vision for this valley that was cut short. I'm just trying to revive it." Martha Jackson, who had once admonished Sam for clinging to his failing farm, spoke up from the front row. "What specific projects are being considered? $50,000 is substantial, but it won't solve every problem in Willow Creek." Sam nodded to Jacob Miller, who unfolded a large diagram and pinned it to the blackboard. Thomas Tucker's original irrigation design, updated with Sam's annotations to reflect modern possibilities. "My grandfather designed an irrigation system that would serve every farm in the valley," Sam explained, approaching the diagram, "using gravity flow from the northern hills and minimizing water loss through covered channels. With modern materials, this system could be built for approximately $12,000 and would reduce everyone's water costs by more than half while increasing supply." He pointed to other sections of the diagram. Community equipment sharing would allow smaller farms to access machinery they couldn't afford individually. Educational expansion would bring agricultural science to our school. A revolving loan fund would provide capital at reasonable rates instead of Harrington Bank's crushing terms. The practical nature of these proposals shifted the mood in the room. Skepticism remained, but it was now tempered with calculation as farmers, shopkeepers, and laborers began to contemplate how such changes might affect their daily struggles. "What does Harrison Harrington get out of this?" called another voice. "He's never given away a penny without expecting a dollar in return." "Public recognition," Sam answered simply. "The Harrington name will be associated with community improvement rather than control. Beyond that, his family will maintain influence through Catherine's position on the board, but they'll no longer hold unilateral power over our water, our credit, or our futures." The questions continued for another hour, growing increasingly specific as the initial shock gave way to practical concerns about implementation, timelines, and priorities. Throughout the discussion, Sam noticed something remarkable happening. People who had barely spoken to each other in years were now debating shared interests, forming alignments around specific projects, and recognizing their collective potential. When the time came to elect the Trust's board, the nominees reflected this newfound community engagement. Jacob Miller was unanimously selected for his educational expertise. Martha Jackson's financial acumen as the school's bookkeeper earned her a position. 3 respected farmers representing different parts of the valley were chosen to ensure geographical balance. And to everyone's surprise, Harold Wilson, the general store owner whose prices had long been constrained by Harrington's wholesale monopoly, volunteered and was elected as the 6th member. "Before we conclude," Benjamin Moore announced, "the board needs to select its chairperson, someone to coordinate meetings, liaise with contractors, and serve as the trust's public representative. Sam Tucker," Jacob Miller nominated immediately. "This exists because of his discovery and his courage to challenge the established order." A murmur of agreement spread through the room. Sam raised his hand in objection. "I appreciate the nomination, but I believe my role should be more specific. My grandfather was an irrigation innovator. I'd like to focus on implementing his designs, the work that was denied him. Perhaps Jacob would be a better choice for chairperson, with his experience managing the school board." After brief deliberation, the compromise was accepted. Jacob Miller would chair the board, with Sam serving as project manager for the irrigation system that would form the trust's first major initiative. As the meeting disbanded, the atmosphere in Willow Creek had tangibly shifted. People lingered outside the schoolhouse, continuing discussions that had begun inside. Plans were made, committees formed spontaneously, and a sense of agency replaced the resignation that had characterized the community for generations. Sam watched from the schoolhouse steps, simultaneously exhilarated and exhausted. The events of the past week had transformed not just his circumstances, but his understanding of himself and his connection to the community. "You've started something remarkable," Martha Jackson said, joining him on the steps. "Though I suspect you haven't told us everything about how this came about." Sam smiled faintly. "Some details are better left buried, like the clay pot itself." "Fair enough." Martha studied him with newfound respect. "Your grandfather would be proud, Sam. Not just of what you've accomplished, but how you've accomplished it, bringing people together instead of seeking personal gain." The following days passed in a whirlwind of activity. True to his word, Harrison Harrington transferred $50,000 to the newly established trust account at Montgomery's Bank in Jessup City, a neutral location chosen deliberately to avoid Harrington Bank's involvement. Benjamin Moore finalized the legal documents returning water rights to public ownership, though Harrington's attorneys negotiated a 6-month transition period to ensure continuity of service. Catherine Harrington arrived in Willow Creek 3 days after the schoolhouse meeting, her presence causing nearly as much stir as Sam's original discovery. At 25, she had spent the past 7 years away from the valley, first at an Eastern Women's College, then in Chicago working with a social welfare organization. Her return as the Harrington representative on the trust board was widely viewed as Harrison's attempt to control the initiative through his daughter. Her first visit to Sam's farm suggested otherwise. "Mr. Tucker," she greeted him, stepping down from a modest Ford rather than her father's Cadillac. "I thought we should speak privately before the first official board meeting." Sam invited her into his cabin, acutely aware of its humble condition compared to Harrington House. If Catherine noticed, she gave no indication, accepting a cup of coffee and seating herself at his kitchen table with comfortable ease. "My father believes he's punishing me by assigning me to this position," she said directly, surprising Sam with her candor. "He expects me to protect family interests while appearing to support community development, essentially to sabotage from within, while maintaining the appearance of philanthropy." Sam studied her carefully. Catherine Harrington had her father's confident posture, but none of his cold calculation in her expression. Her direct gaze suggested honesty, though Sam had learned to be cautious in his assessments. "And what do you intend to do?" he asked. "Disappoint him primarily," she replied with a slight smile. "I've spent years studying community development models in urban settings. The trust you've established here represents an opportunity to apply similar principles." in a rural context. She removed a notebook from her bag and opened it to reveal detailed annotations on Thomas Tucker's irrigation designs. Your grandfather's approach was remarkably forward-thinking for his time. With some modernization, it could serve as a model for other agricultural communities facing water scarcity. Sam's surprise must have shown on his face. You didn't expect actual engagement from a Harrington, Catherine observed. Understandable, given our family's history in this valley. But I'm not my father or my grandfather, Mr. Tucker, and I suspect you know something about escaping the limitations of family legacy. Sam, he corrected. If we're going to work together, you should call me Sam. Catherine, she replied with a nod. Now, shall we discuss how to maximize the impact of this irrigation system within the available budget? I've taken the liberty of contacting several suppliers in Pittsburgh who might offer better rates than the local options. For the next 2 hours, they reviewed plans and possibilities, finding unexpected alignment in their visions for Willow Creek's development. Catherine's education and experience complemented Sam's practical knowledge of the land and its needs. By the time she departed, Sam had revised his assumptions about both Catherine Harrington and the potential scope of the trust's impact. The first official board meeting took place the following evening in the schoolhouse. Jacob Miller called the session to order, with 7 members present and nearly 30 community observers in attendance, a level of civic participation unprecedented in Willow Creek's recent history. The agenda focused on immediate priorities: establishing the Irrigation Project Committee, creating guidelines for the Equipment Sharing Program, and developing criteria for the first round of small business loans. Catherine Harrington's contributions were substantive and supportive, confounding those who had expected obstruction from the Harrington representative. As the meeting progressed, Sam found himself watching the observers as much as the board members. Faces that had been marked by resignation just days earlier now showed engagement, hope, and the tentative emergence of community pride. The clay pot's discovery had created possibilities beyond monetary value. It had awakened Willow Creek from decades of enforced dependence. After the meeting adjourned, Sam walked with Jacob Miller back toward their respective homes. "Something's been bothering me," Miller said after they had walked in companionable silence for several minutes. "Harrison Harrington surrendered too easily. $50,000 is significant even for him, and relinquishing water rights fundamentally undermines his control. What leverage did you really have, Sam?" Sam hesitated, then decided Miller deserved the complete truth. He described Elizabeth Harrington's note, Sullivan's vendetta, and the bluff regarding comprehensive documentation of Harrington crimes. Miller whistled softly. "Dangerous game you played. If Harrison had called your bluff." "But he didn't," Sam replied. "Men like Harrington always have secrets they fear being exposed. I gambled that his grandfather's embezzlement wasn't the only skeleton in the family closet. A gamble that paid off for all of us." Miller clapped Sam on the shoulder. "Just be careful. Harrison Harrington didn't build an empire by accepting defeat graciously. He's retreated for now, but I doubt he's surrendered." Sam nodded, accepting the warning. "That's why the trust needs to move quickly, establish the irrigation system, implement the equipment sharing, begin issuing loans, create enough momentum and community involvement that not even the Harringtons can reverse it." As they reached the crossroads where their paths diverged, Miller paused. "You know, when you were a boy in my classroom, I never would have predicted this. You were quiet, reserved, never the one to raise your hand or challenge others." "People on change," Sam said simply. "No," Miller corrected with a shrewd smile. "People reveal themselves when circumstances demand it. This was always in you, Sam Tucker. It just took a clay pot and a crisis to bring it out." Sam returned to his cabin under a sky brilliant with stars, contemplating Miller's observation. He had never sought leadership or confrontation, preferring the solitary work of farming to community engagement. Yet here he was, at the center of Willow Creek's transformation, navigating alliances with former adversaries and challenging powers he once thought immovable. All because he had dug for water and found something far more valuable, the buried truth that would set a community free. 3 months passed with remarkable swiftness. Summer heat gave way to autumn crispness as Willow Creek underwent a transformation more profound than the changing seasons. The irrigation project had broken ground within 2 weeks of the Trust's formation, employing dozens of local men who had previously struggled to find consistent work. Thomas Tucker's original designs, enhanced by modern materials, and Catherine Harrington's connections to Pittsburgh suppliers, guided the creation of a system that would serve every farm in the valley. On a clear October morning, Sam stood on the ridge overlooking the northern channel, watching as crews laid the final sections of pipe that would connect the mountain spring to the main distribution network. From this vantage point, he could see nearly the entire valley, a patchwork of farms now linked by more than geography. Glinting in the sunlight, the new water channels traced connections between properties once isolated by necessity and Harrington. Policy, quite a view, Catherine observed, joining him on the ridge. Over the past months, their professional collaboration had evolved into something approaching friendship, tentative and cautious on both sides, but genuine nonetheless. "My grandfather used to bring me up here when I was a boy," Sam replied. "He'd point to each farm and tell me their stories, who had come from where, what they grew, how they survived the hard years. He saw the valley as a single living organism, not separate plots of land. A visionary perspective," Catherine acknowledged, "and one my family actively discouraged for generations." Sam glanced at her, still finding her candor about Harrington. Practices surprising. Yet here you are, helping implement exactly what your great-grandfather prevented mine from creating. Catherine smiled slightly. "Perhaps that's how progress happens, not in smooth, continuous improvement, but in interruptions and corrections of historical wrongs. It just takes longer than it should." They watched in companionable silence as the workers below connected. The final joint, completing the physical infrastructure of a system that would begin operation the following week. The community equipment barn was already functioning, housing 3 tractors, a combine harvester, and various specialized tools purchased by the Trust and available to all valley farmers for minimal usage fees. The loan program had approved its first round of applications, providing capital for everything from seed purchases to business expansions. "The board meeting tonight should be interesting," Catherine remarked. "My father will be attending." Sam raised an eyebrow. "Harrison hasn't shown any interest in the Trust's activities until now. What's changed?" "The success," Catherine replied simply. He expected this initiative to falter, for farmers to argue over water allocations, for equipment to be misused, for loans to go unpaid. When failure didn't materialize, his strategy shifted. Now he wants to associate himself more directly with the progress. "Politics," Sam observed with a hint of disgust. "My father's natural habitat," Catherine agreed. "But his presence offers an opportunity. The Trust needs the county road improved to facilitate transportation of harvests. Harrison chairs the county commission that approves such projects. So we welcome him with open arms while pursuing our agenda," Sam concluded, recognizing the practical necessity despite his reservations. Their conversation was interrupted by Elmer Jenkins' grandson, Tommy, who came running up the ridge path, waving excitedly. "Mr. Tucker! Mr. Tucker! They're ready for the test!" the boy called, his young voice carrying on the autumn breeze. "Mr. Miller says to tell you they're opening the main valve in 10 minutes. Sam checked his pocket watch. "Right on schedule. We should head down. The gathering at the central distribution hub had grown beyond the work crews to include dozens of community members who had come to witness this milestone. Jacob Miller stood by the main valve, his usual teacher's dignity enhanced by the responsibility of this moment. As trust chairman, the symbolic honor of activating the system fell to him. "Before we open the valve," Miller announced to the assembled crowd, "I believe a few words are appropriate. 3 months ago, we stood in the schoolhouse and dared to imagine a different future for Willow Creek. One built on cooperation rather than competition, on shared prosperity rather than isolated struggle." He gestured to the network of pipes extending outward toward the farms. "What we create today is more than a water system. It is the physical manifestation of a new community covenant, a promise that we will no longer allow artificial divisions to prevent natural connections." Miller nodded to Sam. None of this would exist without Samuel Tucker's discovery and courage. But equally important has been his insistence that this project belongs to all of us, that its benefits must flow to every corner of the valley, just as the water soon will. Sam accepted the acknowledgement with a slight nod, uncomfortable with public recognition, but understanding its importance in this context. His gaze moved over the gathered faces, men and women who had recently been strangers despite lifetimes of proximity, now united in purpose and possibility. "Mr. Tucker," Miller invited, "would you join me?" Together, they gripped the large valve wheel and began to turn. The mechanism moved smoothly, engineered to last generations. A deep rumble vibrated through the pipes as water from the mountain spring began its journey through the new system, flowing toward fields that had thirsted for decades. A cheer rose from the crowd as gauges confirmed successful pressure throughout the network. Children ran alongside the main channel, racing the invisible water toward the distribution nodes. Even the most skeptical farmers smiled as they contemplated the coming spring, when reliable water would transform their planting possibilities. After the celebration dispersed, Sam walked alone through his own modest fields. The irrigation outlets, installed along his property boundaries, would ensure consistent water for the first time in his farming experience. Come spring, he could expand beyond the stunted crops that had barely sustained him, perhaps even experimenting with the specialized varieties his grandfather had documented in notebooks Sam had recently discovered in the cabin's rafters. As dusk approached, Sam prepared for the board meeting, changing from work clothes into more appropriate attire. His second-hand suit had been retired, replaced by a new one purchased from a tailor in Jessup City, a modest indulgence justified by his position as project manager. The trust paid him a small salary now, enough to cover his immediate needs. While he rebuilt his farm's productivity, the schoolhouse was unusually full when Sam arrived, Harrison Harrington's presence having drawn additional observers. The elder Harrington sat beside his daughter, his expression inscrutable as community members filed in. He acknowledged Sam with a curt nod, neither friendly nor openly hostile, but measuring in its assessment. Jacob Miller called the meeting to order, proceeding through the standard agenda with efficient dignity. Reports from various committees confirmed progress across all initiatives: irrigation completion, equipment usage tracking, loan repayment schedules. When the time came for new business, Miller recognized Harrison Harrington. "Thank you, Chairman." "Miller," Harrington began, rising to address the board and observers, "I've followed the Trust's activities with interest these past months. What has been accomplished is noteworthy." The grudging compliment hung in the air, its reluctance evident to all present. "The County Commission will be considering road improvements in the coming year," Harrington continued. "I'm prepared to recommend prioritization of the Willow Creek access road contingent upon the Trust's participation in maintenance costs. This proposal, offering support but extracting concessions, was quintessential Harrison Harrington, using even acts of cooperation to establish advantage. Catherine caught Sam's eye from across the table, her slight smile confirming they had anticipated this approach. Jacob Miller, well versed in negotiation after decades of securing school funding, responded with diplomatic precision. "The board appreciates your interest in our transportation needs, Commissioner Harrington. Perhaps a joint committee could evaluate cost-sharing arrangements based on proportional usage and relative resources." The verbal chess match continued for several exchanges, eventually resulting in a tentative agreement that protected the trust's finances while securing Harrington's support for the road project. Throughout the discussion, Sam observed Harrison closely, noting the subtle shifts in his demeanor. The powerful man was adjusting to a new reality, one where his influence remained substantial but no longer absolute. After the meeting adjourned, Harrison approached Sam directly, motioning him toward a quiet corner of the schoolhouse. Catherine watched from a distance, visibly concerned but respecting the private nature of the encounter. "You've orchestrated quite the transformation, Tucker," Harrison said without preamble. "From failing farmer to community leader in a remarkably short time." "The community transformed itself," Sam replied evenly. "I just helped uncover the means." Harrison's eyes narrowed slightly. "Let's dispense with the humble act. We both know what you did, leveraging my family's past to force my cooperation, effective if somewhat lacking in honor. No less honorable than suppressing my grandfather's innovations to maintain control," Sam countered, keeping his voice low but firm, "or manipulating water access to keep farms dependent." The two men regarded each other in silence. The generational conflict between their families crystallized in this moment of direct confrontation. "My daughter believes in what you're doing here," Harrison finally said, surprising Sam with this change of direction. "She sees potential in this community trust model that extends beyond Willow Creek. Her enthusiasm is problematic for certain business interests, but genuine nonetheless." Sam waited, sensing there was more to this revelation than paternal observation. "Catherine has requested permanent reassignment to the trust, beyond her role as family representative. She wants to develop specialized irrigation projects for the smaller farms." Harrison's disapproval was evident, though tempered with what appeared to be reluctant respect. "I've agreed to her request." "That's unexpected," Sam acknowledged. "Indeed." Harrison straightened his already impeccable suit. "Consider it my concession to inevitability, Tucker. This valley is changing, and the Harrington approach must adapt accordingly. Catherine represents that adaptation better than I could." He extended his hand, not in friendship, but in the business-like acknowledgement of a new arrangement. "We'll likely never be allies, Tucker, but perhaps we need not remain active adversaries." Sam accepted the handshake, recognizing the significant if calculated concession it represented. "For the valley's sake, I hope that's possible." Harrison nodded, then turned to collect his daughter for their departure. As they left, Catherine glanced back at Sam, her expression conveying both surprise at her father's behavior and determination regarding their shared work ahead. The schoolhouse emptied gradually, community members departing in small groups, their conversations animated with plans and possibilities unleashed by the day's water system activation. Sam remained behind, helping Jacob Miller arrange the room for the next day's classes. Harrison Harrington offering compromise, Miller marveled. Quietly. "If I hadn't witnessed it myself, I wouldn't have believed it possible." "It's not compromise so much as strategic repositioning," Sam replied. "He's recognizing that direct opposition would cost more than selective cooperation." Miller chuckled. "You've become quite the student of power dynamics, Sam. A necessary Education, I suppose, given your role. An ongoing education, Sam corrected. I'm still learning every day. As they finished their task, Miller retrieved an item from his desk, a small wooden box hand-carved with intricate patterns. I've been meaning to give you this. Found it while organizing some old school records. Sam opened the box to discover a faded photograph of his grandfather standing beside a primitive irrigation channel, pride evident in his stance despite the image's deterioration. Taken the summer before he died, Miller explained, one of his experimental water projects on the north section of your land. The school board documented it as a potential educational model before Harrington interference shut it down. Sam studied the image intently, noting details of his grandfather's design that aligned with elements he had incorporated into the new system. History doesn't disappear, he observed. It just waits to be rediscovered when the time is right. Like a clay pot buried in a field, Miller agreed with a smile. They walked together from the schoolhouse into the clear autumn evening. The main street of Willow Creek showed subtle signs of renewal. Fresh paint on the general store, new benches outside the barber shop, plans posted for a community market building to be constructed in the spring. The changes were modest but meaningful, physical manifestations of a community reclaiming its potential. Will you run for county commissioner next year? Miller asked as they reached the crossroads. There's talk you should challenge Harrington directly. Sam shook his head. My place is in the fields and with the irrigation project. Political ambition would undermine what we're building here. Make it about individuals rather than community. Wise perspective, Miller approved. Though I suspect leadership will continue finding you whether you seek it or not. As they parted ways, Sam continued toward his cabin, following the path that ran alongside his property. In the deepening twilight, he could make out the newly installed irrigation outlets at regular intervals along his field boundaries. Promise of a productivity his land had never known. Near the spot where he had discovered the clay pot months earlier, Sam paused. The hollow had been filled in during the irrigation installation, the physical evidence of his discovery erased by the progress it had enabled. Yet standing there, he felt a profound connection to the cyclical nature of justice, how truths buried by one generation could nourish the rebirth of another when finally unearthed. From this vantage point, he could see lights appearing in farmhouses across the valley as families settled in for the evening. Tomorrow, these same families would wake to a new reality, one where water flowed according to need rather than privilege, where equipment could be shared rather than duplicated, where capital served community rather than controlling it, all because he had dug in this spot, seeking water and finding instead a buried history that would water Willow Creek for generations to come. Sam touched the soil once more, a gesture of gratitude to the land that had protected its secret until the moment was right for revelation. Then he continued home, carrying the wooden box with his grandfather's photograph, a reminder that visions never truly die when they're etched into the hearts of those who follow. Behind him, Willow Creek settled into night, a community transformed, not just by the gold from a clay pot, but by the courage to imagine a different future and the determination to build it, one pipe, one connection, one shared resource at a time. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.